Hey everybody, I've been getting a lot of requests for a PVC longbow, so today we're going to be making a PVC longbow, or more accurately a PVC flatbow. So for this you're going to need a couple tools. So the first thing I would suggest is you need a heat source of some kind. Today we're going to be using a heat gun, though you could use a torch or an electric or gas range. Those work equally well. I prefer the heat gun because it's a little more controllable and it's a little more efficient, but pretty much it's whatever you've got. And you're going to need something to measure with, like a measuring tape or a yardstick. You're going to need a Sharpie or other permanent marker, or a grease pen or something for marking PVC pipe. I like to use two saws. I use a coping saw. You're going to be using this for tapering the tips. And then I like using a hacksaw with a round carbide blade in here. And this is for cutting the string nocks on the bow. So you could use a 1/8 inch file, or you could even use any other type of file to rough those in. And then you're going to either need, this is 1 inch diameter heat shrink tubing. It's usually used on electric wiring. Or you can use electrical tape or something. This is just to bind the tips before we finish up the bow. And then you're going to need a 1 inch Schedule 40 PVC pipe. And we're going to start for this bow. It's just going to be a simple target bow. You're going to want it to be 5 feet long, so 60 inches long. And then the only homemade tool you're going to need is, this is my flattening jig. It's really simple. It's a 1x4 inch plywood board, pine wood board. It's 4 feet long, and then on one end it's got 2 little risers. So this is what's going to start our taper. So this is going to be on the handle side when we flatten the bow, so that we get exactly the right amount of taper in here. And for this particular bow you want this to be 1 inch. So the height of each of these spacers is 1 inch. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so now we're going to start heating up our pipe to flatten it. And before you heat it up, what you want to do is you want to take your tape measure and measure the very center of the pipe here. Then what you want to do is you want to measure up and mark 1 inch above and 3 inches below. This gives you a 4 inch handle section. So when you grip the bow, this is how it's going to be gripped. And your arrow is going to go up here. So this is going to be your top limb, and this is going to be your bottom limb over here. Alright, so now before we get started heating up the pipe, I just want to go over some safety. When you heat up the pipe, it gets very, very hot. So you're either going to need to handle the pipe with a heavy towel, or what would be even better would be like a hot pad or a heat resistant glove of some kind, an oven glove. Just anything that's going to keep you from getting burned, because if this touches your skin, it will burn, and if the pipe's hot enough, it could even fuse with your skin, which would be even worse. So just keep that in mind. And also keep that in mind, keep in mind that when you're heating pipe, it's going to give off some pretty harmful fumes. So make sure to do this in a well-ventilated area. Ideally, you want to do this outside. Because it's not very good for you. Or, wear a respirator. Ideally, you'd want to do all these things. Make sure it's well ventilated, outdoors, and you have a respirator. So now that we've gone over some safety, I'm just going to show you. This is how I heat up my pipe. You can do this with the heat gun. This also works if using a torch or a hot plate or a range. It's all pretty much the same. So what you want to do is you want to start a little bit behind where you've marked. You want to heat up this entire section here because this needs to be flattened as well. So what you want to do is you want to start like this, turn your device on, and then you want to draw the pipe back slowly, fairly slowly, but also at a rapid pace. You don't want to stay in one place too long or it's going to burn. Make a quarter turn, bring it back, and try to keep it at an even pace. And then quarter turn, bring it back. And so you just keep doing that quarter turn until it gets soft. So now I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to show you what I mean. So here we go. Okay, so now you can see that the pipe is definitely starting to droop. So this is good. You want the pipe to be nice and flexible before you even try to flatten it. Because if it's not completely flexible all the way through, it's not going to flatten properly and you might have weak spots. So you just want to make sure it's nice and evenly heated all the way through. Now, a good way to test this is just to pinch it. So, as you can see, I'm just pinching it, and it feels pretty constant throughout. It's a little stiff right around here, but you should be able to just take your fingers and almost bring it flat. Once you can do that, it's pretty much done and ready to be flattened. So once you've got it to the point where it's really flexible, what you want to do is you want to take it to the floor or another flat surface and then press the flattening jig on top of it. So it feels pretty much flexible enough. So I'm just going to heat it one more time. And then we're going to take it to the flattening jig. Alright, so once you've got it heated enough, you want to put it down on the flat surface, and then you want to put your flattening jig over it. So you got to do this as quickly as possible because there's only a very narrow window in which the pipe will be flexible enough to be flattened in this way. You could use clamps, but I usually just throw it on the ground and step on it right away. And then once it starts to cool down, you can remove the jig and you can see that it's got this nice taper to it. So now what you want to do is you just want to inspect it. So as you can see, I've got a nice taper that goes from here, flattens out over here, and then it comes out to this side. So what you want to do is you just want to make sure that there aren't any really uneven spots. I had a little burn here. You want to really avoid that. I'd say that if it was burned closer in here, I would just scrap it and get another pipe. But up here it's not too bad. And then now what you also want to do is you want to look down the pipe, if you can, and straighten it out. Just try to take out any bends. So just know that right now the pipe is very hot. It's just that I'm kind of used to it, so it doesn't really bother me much. But I suggest you use gloves when doing this. So, now that you've got one flattened limb, just got to repeat and do the other side. Alright, let's do that. There's also another way to heat the pipe, and this is how you could do it if you had a heat gun or a torch. It'd be kind of hard to do it with a range, but all you would do is you lay your pipe on the ground, and then you would take your heat gun or your torch, and you would actually just pass it over the pipe. So instead of moving the pipe over your heat gun or your torch, you pass your heat gun or your torch over the pipe. And what this is going to do is that it allows you to keep it in one spot. You don't have to move it around as much. And the benefit to that is that when you've got it up in the air, you're giving the pipe time to cool down, so it takes a lot longer to heat it up consistently. I'm doing this on my floor, but I suggest you do it on a scrap piece of wood, like a nice solid red oak board or something similar, something that's not going to burn. So yeah, so I'm going to heat this up, and then we'll move on to the next step. So this is how you do it on the floor. So I've already heated it a couple times, and you can see it's starting to flatten, so just got to keep it up a little more. You got to make sure you do it on both sides so that you have a nice, easy, even flattening rather than it being uneven. So just so you can see, it's really pliable right now. It's also really hot, so I don't suggest you do that with your bare hands. Alright, so now you just got to make sure it's lined up with the other limb. And then you take your jig, put it down, then you apply your pressure. And then it just flattens like that. Once that's cemented, you just want to go do what you did with the other one and straighten it out. There you go. Now we're ready to go on to the next step. Alright, so the next thing you want to do is you want to make a V on the end of your bow here. So these two top lines are 1/4 of an inch from the edge. So you just measure 1/4 of an inch from the edge to get these marks. And then your third mark down here is 9 inches in from the edge. So you just measure in 9 inches, and that's your mark. And then you just draw a line from the center to these. And this has to be centered in the bow. And so you just do that, and then you want to copy that for each of the 4 sides of your bow. And then now we're ready to cut these out. Alright, I'm going to show you what it looks like when you finish cutting it. Alright, so now that you've cut this out, you could go and you could sand it. As long as it's fairly straight going this way, going up and down, then these two halves will come together nicely. So what you want to do is, I'm going to turn on the heat gun, and I'm just going to heat this area right here so that I can bring the two pieces together. So I'm going to do that. And as you're heating it up, you can use any heat source for this. You just want to continually attempt to flex it together, because you want to go just to when it'll give, but you don't want it to heat up too much in the spot. Alright, so once it's good, it's going to look like this. So it comes together. Now you've got a little bit of play in it right now, so while it's cooling down, you want to really make sure that everything's together. You know, get your heat pads or your heat resistant gloves and just grip it. Make sure that it stays in line, you know, both thickness wise and width wise. You know, you just want to keep tweaking it and making sure it stays fairly straight. And actually what you can do is at this